Hi, and welcome. If this is your first time here, I am really glad you found your way to this space. My name is Fernanda, and this is Piano Piano. In Italian, piano piano means slowly, but not just slowly, it also means gently, with care, with intention. And I chose this name because this is not a podcast about doing more or fixing yourself or becoming some optimized version of who you are. This is a space for listening, for noticing, for becoming in your own time. I want this to feel like you're sitting with me here in a quiet room, maybe with a cup of tea, maybe at the end of a long day, which is my case right now. And we're just talking about what it means to be human. Not perfectly, not efficiently, but honestly. Before we go any further, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. Not in a resume way, but in a human way. Professionally, I am an architect, but like my yoga teacher used to tell me, I am a poet and an artist by soul. And on the daily basis, I am an architect. I work with buildings and systems, regulations, drawings, structure, but I've always been just as fascinated by the invisible structures. The ones that shape how we feel, how we relate to time, how safe we feel in our bodies, and how we move through the world. I grew up in Brazil and I moved to the United States when I was 18 without speaking any English. So for a long time, I've lived between languages, between cultures, between identities, and that teaches you something very early, that there is no single way to be a person. I've always been deeply interested in psychology, philosophy, nature, human development, spirituality, art. And I have also been in therapy since I was 12 years old. I don't say this lightly. It really shaped how I see emotions, behavior, patterns, and healing. I am also trained as a yoga teacher, and I believe deeply that the body carries wisdom that the mind doesn't always understand right away. So my life has always been this mix of structures and softness and logic and intuition, discipline and surrender. And Piano Piano was born from that intersection. For a long time, I thought that the way I am was wrong. I speak slowly. In every language that I speak slowly. I process deeply, and I need time to feel things before I can name them. And in a world that moves fast, that rewards speed, productivity, confidence, certainty, I thought I needed to change that about myself. I tried to talk faster. That never really worked. I tried to decide faster, and I made very bad decisions. And also to move faster. But what I realized slowly is that my rhythm is not a flaw. It's actually where my clarity comes from. It's where my creativity lives. It's where my intuition speaks. And I know I am not the only one who feels this way. So many of us are tired, overstimulated, disconnected from our own signals and our internal cycles. We're constantly asking, what should I do? What's the right choice? What's the next step? But we are rarely asking, how do I actually feel? What is my body telling me? What pace do I need right now? This podcast is an invitation to come back to that listening. Not because life doesn't require action, it does, but because aligned action comes from connection, not pressure. And when I talk about slowing down, I'm not just talking about lifestyle. I'm also talking about philosophy. One of the traditions that deeply shaped how I see the world is yoga. Not just as a movement, but as a way of understanding the mind, suffering, attention, and freedom. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, yoga is described as the quieting of the fluctuations of the mind, not the destruction of the mind, but the softening of its constant noise. And I want to talk about that here, about the sutras, about the philosophy behind the practice, about what it means to live in more awareness, more compassion, more intentionality. But I don't want to do that in a preachy way, but in a very human, very imperfect way. Because I am not sitting on a mountain meditating all day. I live in a very real world. I work, I stress, I overthink, and I doubt. And that's exactly why these teachings matter to me. And actually, this is connected to a big decision I made last year. In June of 2025, I deactivated my Instagram, not because I don't love creativity or connection or sharing, but because I started to feel like I was always performing. Like I needed to show up in a certain way, at a certain frequency, with a certain energy. And at the same time, I was constantly being flooded with information I never asked for, I didn't search for, and honestly, I don't need. It felt like my nervous system was never resting, and slowly I realized that instead of inspiring me, it was actually harming me. It was pulling me away from myself. So stepping away wasn't about disappearing. It was about protecting my attention. Because attention is life. What we constantly look at becomes what we think about. And what we think about becomes how we feel. And how we feel becomes how we live. And yoga philosophy talks about all of this a lot. About what we consume mentally, about attachment, about distraction, about clarity. So, in this podcast, I want to bring those teachings back into everyday language, not as rules, but as gentle invitations. Ways of asking, is this helping me become more myself? Or is it pulling me away from who I really am? That question alone has changed a lot in my life. And maybe because I'm an architect, this is how I often think about growth. Not as climbing faster, but as building foundations. In construction, what you don't see is often more important than what you do see. The foundation takes time. It's slow. It's not glamorous. No one claps for it. But if you rush it, everything on top becomes unstable. And I think we're often trying to decorate a life that doesn't yet feel safe to live in. We want the relationships, the careers, the confidence, the clarity. But we haven't given ourselves time to build emotional safety, self-trust, nervous system regulation, inner permission. So slowing down isn't about doing less forever. It's about doing the invisible work first. The work that no one sees, but that it holds everything. And that work has seasons. There are seasons for planting, seasons for growing, seasons for resting, and seasons for blooming. If you try to force spring in winter, nothing will survive. So, if you're in a slower season right now, a quieter season, a season for questioning, that doesn't mean you're failing. It may mean you're preparing. Another thing that feels important to say here is you will hear different languages in this space. Portuguese, English, Italian. Not because I want to be fancy, but because that's really how my mind and my heart work. Some emotions live in Portuguese for me. Some thoughts feel clear in English, and some longings sound like Italian. And instead of choosing one and hiding the others, I decided to let all of them exist here because we all have multiple selves. Even if we speak only one language, there's the professional you, the tired you, the hopeful you, the scared you, the version of you that wants to change, the version of you that wants safety, and they all deserve a seat at the table. This podcast isn't about choosing one identity and killing the rest. It's about integration, letting the full human experience be welcome. So, what are we going to talk about here? We'll talk about growth, but not in a hustle way. We'll talk about relationships, purpose, fear, timing, creativity, healing, big life decisions. Sometimes I'll share personal stories, sometimes reflections, sometimes philosophical ideas, sometimes things I'm still figuring out myself. This is not a space of experts giving instructions. It's a space of companions walking together. My intention is not to tell you what to do, but to help you hear yourself more clearly. And before I close this first episode, I want to leave you with a small invitation. Just for today, try not to rush one thing, one conversation, one meal, one decision. Let yourself feel the rhythm your body is asking for, not the rhythm the world is shouting at you, but the one that feels kind inside. And if you're in a season of not knowing, of waiting, of becoming, I want you to know that this too is meaningful. You're not late, you're not broken, you're not doing life wrong. You are building piano piano. Thank you for being here with me today. And I'll talk to you again very soon.